Welcome to Dateline Schools, a presentation of St. Clair County RESA, with your host, Chris Troy.
In 2003, the invention of e-cigarettes was developed. By 2007, they began to flood the U.S. market, presenting themselves as a safe substitute for cigarettes. As with many things, teens began to use e-cigarettes for social acceptance, and vaping was born. Now in 2024, schools throughout the United States are attempting to warn students about the hazards of vaping. And one of those schools is Port Huron Northern. Joining me this week on Dateline Schools is my special guest, Port Huron Northern counselor, Julie Barlass. Julie, thanks a lot for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So here at Port Huron Northern, there's the Make a Difference Club. What is that all about?
Yeah, so we have a group of students here who just want to just make a difference in the lives of other students. And so their primary focus started looking at our special needs students and that population. And, you know, they started making a prom for those students where they had a special night. They rolled out the red carpet. They made a great big to-do about those special needs students, had a beautiful night. And then from there, it's kind of elaborated on to other areas of our building. And so this year, that group focused specifically on vaping and trying to stop that within our culture here at Northern.
Well, I know vaping is kind of a big thing when it comes to younger adults. Is it they just think, well, it's not as bad as tobacco? Or what do you think the thought process is?
I think you're exactly right. Our students in many cases think that vaping is the healthy alternative, if you will, to smoking. They think that because smoke is not actually involved, that the vaping is the better option. But unfortunately, they don't think about the toxic chemicals that they're breathing directly into their lungs.
And I guess this is almost like a peer-to-peer thing where the campaign, your Make a Difference Club students are reaching out directly to their peers.
Well, actually, what we did this year, we looked at the behavior referrals that we were getting here at Northern. We started at the very beginning of the school year, so back in September, and we noticed that the number one behavior referral was due to vaping. And so as a collective building, we wanted to do a school-wide event where we really focused on stopping that within our culture here. And so we started with the Make a Difference Club. And we went to them and asked, what do you think would be a good way to get this message out to our students? And what they told us was, if you could bring in a speaker who is close to our age, who could speak to the harmful effects of vaping and the dangers of vaping, they felt that that would be the most effective way to reach our students. So that's exactly what we did.
Julie, you mentioned that the Make a Difference Club wanted to bring in a speaker or bring in an organization to help them with this anti-vaping campaign. How did that happen?
Well, as we began to research and look for different individuals who might be able to come and speak, Mr. Farnsworth, who is the Make a Difference Club advisor, came across the Daniel Ament story. And if you're familiar with Daniel, you know that when he was 16 years old, he was the first person to receive a double lung transplant. And he's right here from southeastern Michigan. So he was a local guy relatively, and he had a double lung transplant at the young age of 16.
Now, that was because of his vaping?
Yeah, so he actually was a very talented athlete at the time. He was very active physically, no prior health conditions that he was aware of. And so he just started socially vaping. He didn't even buy them himself. He just used vapes from his friends, just took an occasional hit for several weeks, kind of went into a few months, and then he ended up getting very sick. And so he ended up in the hospital, ended up in a coma for several weeks, ended up having this first double lung transplant. And so fast forward to today, he is now a 21-year-old. He is actually a student at Michigan State University in their business program, but unfortunately his life looks different than most college students. He has to take all online classes. He takes many medications to try to counteract his body from rejecting the lungs. And so he's still dealing with this every single day. And so he wasn't able to come physically to Northern to do this presentation. We had to do a Zoom presentation, but he was able to be here live with us via Zoom. And that also allowed us to include both the students at Northern as well as Port Huron High and the Phoenix Academy. So virtually, if you have a student in the Port Huron area schools in high school, they got this presentation. So it was really nice that we could share it with the whole district.
Julie, after hearing from Daniel, how did the students respond?
You know, it was very well received. I wasn't sure how it would be received, but actually, I had students coming up to me later saying, you know, I was just vaping on an occasional time and I will never do it again. I didn't realize what I was playing with. I didn't realize this could happen from just an occasional vape. And so it really made those who just do it socially think very hard about it. Of course, we still have students who struggle with vaping as an addiction, and that's something different, right? Like we're trying to get that message out as well of don't quit quitting, right? It's never too soon to start quitting. And you always want to keep striving for that, and we're trying to give them different resources to help with that. But I think that it was very well received. Our students were very surprised at the seriousness of what could happen from vaping.
Julie, vaping is a relatively newer thing compared to other vices. Is there an age limit to where these kids can purchase vapes, or how do they get a hold of this stuff?
Yeah, so you have to be 21 to purchase a vape. Unfortunately, there's plenty of people who supply them illegally to those underage. And so this is something that we have definitely tried to combat here at Northern. And, we have our human resource officer, and students are actually issued a ticket if they are found vaping here because it is illegal for them, and it's illegal to give them out. So, yeah, you have to be 21.
Julie, the Make a Difference Club put together a campaign, an anti-vaping campaign. What did that look like?
Well, as a school, we tried to include as many students in this campaign as possible. And so the Make a Difference Club, like I said, brought in the speaker, Daniel Ament, which was phenomenal. And then we also included our lead team, which is another group here at Northern made up of students who look at the climate and culture here at Northern and try to address any kind of concern or problem area that we see here. And so when we found that vaping was our number one concern here at Northern back in the beginning of this school year, the lead team put together a really nice video where they demonstrated for our student body our expectations around vaping. So number one, we don't allow it, we don't accept it. And number two, we talked about, or the students actually talked about in their video, what to do if you walk into the bathroom and you see somebody vaping. How do you handle it? What are the consequences for that person who is vaping? And so we really tried to educate our students about our expectations, the consequences, as well as what to do if you see this happening. And when we combined that along with the presentation from Daniel Ament, then we also included our art students who created a banner which hung in our hallway, and we had students sign the banner pledging to be vape-free and smoke-free. When we combine all those three efforts, we've really made a significant impact and dent on this issue of vaping in our school. And, I just met as recently as this week with our school administrators, and we noticed that the prevalence of vaping has dropped significantly here at Northern. It is no longer our number one concern. We're back to worrying about things like truancy and tardies, which is much more appropriate and normal in a school setting. So we're really happy that this has had a really big impact on Northern.
Was there any reach out to any of the feeder schools regarding this as well, or was it pretty much kept right here at Northern?
I actually had included some vaping information or resources for parents in our weekly newsletter, and Mr. Kerhulis, our superintendent of schools, has kind of picked that up, and he's now including that in his weekly newsletter to parents as well. So that's kind of how we're reaching the middle schools. We haven't reached out ourselves directly to the middle schools, but I know that they're definitely spreading the information with parents, which I think is really important because kids are really good at hiding their vapes. They look like highlighters sometimes, they look like ink pens, they look like flash drives. They're really easy to get over on a parent if you're not aware of what you should be looking for. And so just sharing those resources out with parents, I think, is really helpful to try to cut down those things, especially when we're talking with middle school students who maybe are just starting to look at those types of devices. So,
Julie, you mentioned last time about how serious the district was taking vaping and the fact that law enforcement could be involved. What should a student do if they see someone vaping? After all, no one really wants to be a tattletale. But, how do students kind of handle that now? Or how is the school handling if a student were to come to you and say, I saw this student vaping?
Yeah, that's a great question because our culture as a whole really is not comfortable with it. You would be really surprised with the number of students who are very, very uncomfortable with vaping and vaping in our bathrooms. And so they actually wouldn't use the bathroom all day because they didn't want to go in there and see someone vaping. And so when we put this campaign out and we put the video out and we encourage students to, text our tip line, we have an anonymous tip line, you can text that. Administrators would go in right away, catch the vapors, and then it was a safer place to be. And so I think that we've really made a big effort and a big move toward making our bathrooms more comfortable and where our students feel safe to go in and use them when they need to. And so certainly that has been a very helpful thing. We've definitely seen a change and a shift in our culture where at the beginning of this school year, kids had no problem walking in the bathroom and vaping, and now they know it's not accepted anymore. It's not a safe place to do that. First of all, it's not allowed, and second of all, our students they're going to tell. They're not comfortable with that happening in their bathrooms.
We all have heard of secondhand smoke as far as cigarettes. Is that an issue with vaping too?
It definitely is. It definitely is. These chemicals are out there. You can't see them, but they're there. And obviously, it's making a big impact on a lot of people medically. And so it's important to communicate that out to our kids.
Well, I'm sure you're really proud of all your Northern students and the Make a Difference Club. So I really want to thank you for allowing me to hear their story and to let our listeners hear our story. So thank you so much again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
For Dateline Schools, I'm Chris Troy. Dateline Schools is a presentation of St. Clair County RESA.